If you could talk to yourself at rock bottom right now and you could say like, hey, we're in medical school, what do you think that guy would say to you?
I wouldn't have believed me. Like I said, I was in the deepest, darkest pain cave I've ever been in. It's no 100 mile I've ever ran comes close to it.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for taking part in this immersive listening experience. A meaningful existence is a moving target that, no matter how close, will always be out of reach. We hope this message finds you with an outstretched hand. As we attempt to uncover complex truths, remember, life's toughest questions can be answered if we all just focus on one thing: being good people.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Good People, episode 69. My guest today is David Millar. David is a med school student and an ultra runner. In today's episode, expect to learn about David's story going from substance abuse, drugs, and alcohol to sobriety, and how that has turned into ultra running, going to med school, and totally reshaping his life. His story is equal parts intense and inspiring. I can't say enough how much I appreciate David's willingness to come on and be vulnerable about the stuff that he's been through on the show. And I hope you get as much out of it as I did. If you guys are on YouTube, remember to head on down and like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on our notifications so you don't miss our weekly uploads. And if while you're listening, you are enjoying the episode, please consider sending the link to someone who you think would enjoy it too. Without further ado, enjoy the show.
Hey guys, Cayman the producer here. Just wanted to give you a heads up before this episode starts that we did unfortunately have an audio error during the recording of this episode. Unfortunately, David's audio cuts out from time to time. Just wanted to apologize for that before it gets started, as it can be a little bit more of a chore to listen to. We hope you enjoy this episode, as we feel like it was too good of an episode not to post. Let's get back to it.
Welcome to the show, man. I'm excited to do this. This is probably the first time in the 69 episodes that we've done that I know like very little about the guest. Obviously, I did some research on you, and you seem like a psychopath and exactly the person that I want to talk to on the show. So welcome, and yeah, man, just get me started with like a little bit about yourself. What is the 30,000 foot view of David?
Well, yeah, I like the word psychopath. There's like one of my favorite quotes is it's healthy to be a psycho every once in a while. And I really try to uphold that in my own life and share that quote with all my close friends. But yeah, man, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to get to know you. You also seem like a beast. Excited to get to know you a little bit as well through this talk. But yeah, there was like, I feel like there's like a lot, but like 30,000 feet up in the air view of myself. Grew up in a small town. I grew up right on the beach in Country City, New Jersey, South Jersey, right near Atlantic City, Cape May area. Grew up like when I believed to be like a totally different version of myself than I am now. Just like the gist is like I was just very like my aim in life was very different. I was like obviously like a kid too, so that had a lot to do with it, but didn't really like know what I wanted. And was very like consumed in like instantly gratifying things, was very like focused on being popular, having fun. I did like healthy things here and there. I've been a runner my whole life. So that kind of like kept me in a good headspace for as long as it could. I was never really the best student, so that affected me. And went through life, like, I'd had like a really fun childhood. Good parents did the best they could, raising me, bringing me up, and just had like a lot of fun as a teenager. And I was very popular and, partying, drinking a lot and making a lot of friends, which was good until like it wasn't. Just to like give you the gist, I guess I'll just get right into it. But I definitely like had a problem with drinking and using drugs that gradually started to develop in high school. Basically, like right when I like picked up a drink or a drug, I just felt it right away. Like I just felt like an obsession toward it. I've always been like a very extreme person in everything that I do. I'm very black and white, even at a young age. I was really into skateboarding, and, I was so into it that I built a half pipe in my backyard so that all my friends could come over and we'd skate my half pipe. I got into like making music really like intensely, and I built like a literally customizable like walk-in recording studio in my garage. So we made music all the time. Like it was just like everything I did was like super intense. And then, like found drinking, found drugs, became a drug addict. So it's just like that's just like a common theme in my life. Like I find stuff that I love, that I really like, and I just like this like intense desire to like do it to the fullest. It's almost like an obsession. It's kind of just very hard to kind of like channel and control at times. And, obviously that's can become very unhealthy, but, through the process of like sobriety and through the process of self-development and through the process of physical exercise and running and journaling and meditation and understanding myself at like a deeper level, I've been able to kind of like twist that into instead of a defect, an asset. And I've been able to do that with a lot of defects in my life. I think that like every defect has an equal and opposite benefit to it. I'm like really big on that. So a lot of like my strongest assets today were 10 years back were my biggest defects. I just kind of like spun them and flipped them on top of their head and was kind of able to like use them to operate at like a different angle, like a different perspective, and it ends up like really serving me well. So yeah, but basically, I'm definitely like a problem and was just getting out of control. And luckily I ended up like in the right place at the right time. And I was like 19, 20 years old at the time. So, eliminating alcohol from your life is like very hard when you're like not even 21 yet. And like, that's just like everybody's idea of fun when you're, in your young 20s.
How old are you now?
I'm 25.
Cool. Yeah. Let's unpack this a little bit, because I have some thoughts. I think this is an interesting perspective. Thanks for sharing that, by the way. Like that's obviously pretty heavy stuff, and I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit more. But something you said early on there piqued this thought. I was listening to a podcast recently. I can't remember whose podcast or who said this, but there was a question posed, and I'll pose it to you because I think it's important. You're big on self-development. Like, man, your Instagram is just like full of the not just inspirational, but like actually productive mindset and valuable pieces of information. Right. And the question is, how much of personal growth do you think happens by way of actual intention? And how much of personal growth do you think happens just by way of getting older? And I think it's an interesting question because obviously, like, you're probably an extreme case of it, being introduced to like the drugs and the alcohol early. And again, I'm sure we'll get into that more. But I feel like for me, the biggest and most pivotal points in my life where I've noticed the most change, I look back and it was just a sense of maturing. And obviously I was involved with it and I wanted to improve myself, but like I'm getting married later this year. And so this has, impacted me hugely because I'm now mindful of what my future is going to probably look like. And it sort of shapes what I know I need to focus on in terms of work and self-improvement and balance and what I'm trying to achieve in terms of happiness and fulfillment, et cetera. And so I think that's an interesting question. And I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on that. How much of that do you feel like was because of you? And how much of it do you think was just by way of getting older and maturing and realizing that you needed something else?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that you definitely like don't have a say in whether you mature or not. Like you just mature as you get older. Like that's just part of the process of being human. I do think that it can be catalyzed and it can be accelerated by, being intentional about your own growth and prioritizing it, which I think is definitely like when I was getting sober was just like the kickoff point of that whole thing was just like what I was introduced to was, self-development and like basically just like being able to be in this position to like customize myself into this human being that like, I ultimately wanted to become. I had role models in my life that like I wanted to be like them, like that's how it all started. But I think that, yeah, you, as you mature, definitely grow no matter what. But I think it puts you at a huge advantage if you can be a younger person and start as early as you can on just like being intentional about like these things, like these healthy things, like whether it's like physical exercise, mindset, reading spiritual literature. I'm big on like developing a relationship with a higher power. Um, all these things I feel like just kind of like put me in a position to like grow even faster at, even a more accelerated rate than maybe my peers were growing. And then like the other big thing too is just like sobriety as like a whole. I'm like so big on that, like on my page too. Like I'm like I had this one post just like how to self-develop, like get sober, because like that is like, I'm convinced that that's like the pinnacle of self-development, because you're in this like, all this reality with yourself where there's really like no escaping. Like drinking is escaping reality, and it's distracting yourself from like your real thoughts and your real self. And it's like, it's good. Like, people have healthy relationships with it, like for sure. I'm like not, I don't want to like be like super like assertive about this topic, but it's just been my experience that like when I removed alcohol, I started growing at an exponential rate. But like that growth wasn't easy. Like that growth in the beginning was super hard because I didn't have my crutch anymore. Like I didn't have my alcohol was how I did everything. It was how I talked to girls. It was how I was able to be social. It's how I was able to build a social network. It was how I got popular. It's how I had fun. Like it's the thing that I looked forward to. Like it was so much of my life when I had to stop. And just removing that one thing gave me everything. Like it's crazy how that works. Like you take one thing out of your life, like just one, and then in return you get everything. So I'm always like big on that. Like even if you don't have a problem, like I encourage people that reach out to me, that DM me, that call, my friends that text me. I reach out to you. I'm like, dude, just like even if you don't have a problem, like I think you should just consider like just stopping for a little bit, because it really does just make you look at yourself in this light that very few people are in, especially at my age. Like
Yeah, I did all of 2023 with no alcohol. I actually had a lady on. Her name's Linda Hancock. She was a family nurse practitioner in her career. She's retired now, but she helps youth with a lot of different health related things. Substances are one of them. And she said there's a big movement of people that are sort of in our generation. I'm 24, by the way,
nice.
that are sort of in our generation that she called it sober curious. And it's a lot of people who are like me, who like I never really had a problem and I just wanted to see what would happen. And I think you're right. Like to echo some of those main points there, I think one of the biggest takeaways is it's important to learn how to do important things socially without the use of alcohol, because I too relied on it a bit. I've always just been like, dude, I've always been just a shy, awkward. I haven't always been a fitness guy. I played a lot of video games growing up. I didn't like really talking to people, and so for me, it was like I could just do that, right? And I didn't like dancing in front of people at parties and anything like that. And I realized pulling it out that I can do all those things at least at some level. I've since reintroduced alcohol. I drink it way less, and again, I probably drank it maybe 2 or 3 days a week, maybe 1 to 3 drinks every time that I drank. So like never really had a problem. I can count on maybe both hands the amount of times that I've really drank heavily in my life. But the reason why I reintroduced it is because I think that there are a lot of positive aspects of it. And just me as a person, I tend to like hole up in the basement and just like do work and be by myself and read books, like that's just my nature. And it's a good way, I think, to connect and be part of a community. I think when I hear somebody like your story, though, it totally makes sense that it's not included in your life, because I'm not really like that. I tend to work hard and obsess over things and like want to do things well, but I'm not this like obsessive, addictive personality type that it seems like you are. So I think that both perspectives are valid, but I would agree with you 100% that if there's probably people listening to this that are like in their 30s or 40s that literally have not stopped drinking alcohol for more than, maybe a week or two since they started at the age of 20 or whatever it was. So yeah, I think it's a great point.
Yeah. I want to ask you too about that year of sobriety, and I'm just like really curious about like how you felt about that and that experience. But I also just want to say before you answer that, the other hard thing about like, you said you reintroduced it to your life. Like the other hard thing, like for me too, like, not continuing to stay sober and not reintroducing it into my life is like you go out to places and like you're like say you don't drink and people just immediately assume that like you have a problem. Like
Yeah.
I'm just starting medical school right now, so a lot of like the first initial couple weeks of medical school is like introducing yourself to people, like meeting your classmates, like meeting your peers, building a network. And unfortunately for me, a lot of that stuff happens in the atmosphere of bars, clubs, like social gatherings that have alcohol. And just show up like drinking LaCroix, and the first like 2 nights, it's like not noticeable. It's like maybe like, oh, you should probably just like not drinking tonight. Then it's like the second, third week, and I'm like still just like slamming LaCroix. People start to like know. They're like, dude, like have a beer or something. And I'm just like, yeah, I like rarely drink. It's kind of just my default because I feel like if I tell people I don't drink, then it's like it's like conversation and they're like, oh, why? And it's just like, it's kind of too much to go into. But yeah, it's very difficult and it kind of like sucks sometimes, that there's so much just like of that like weirdness around the fact that like you just like, you don't drink for whatever reason. But I'm curious to hear about your experience of your sober. That's big time.
Yeah, I think I don't know who said this, but it's like alcohol is the only it's like one of the only substances or drugs that if you don't do it, you have a problem. I think that's really true, and it kind of came from a place for me from that perspective. It was just like why are we doing like there's people who say, especially in the health and wellness space, that are like we're going to look back in 10, 15 years on alcohol like we currently do with cigarettes, which I don't know, I'm not sure, but. For me, I ran my first 100-miler. I've only run one, but I ran a 100-miler in September of 2022. And for like 8 weeks leading up to that, I think I had 1 or 2 glasses of wine in like the 8 weeks. But before that 8-week period, so like August, September, and then part of July, I was drinking several nights a week, like 2 to 3 drinks for pretty much no reason. Like I would just have it with dinner. And if I had to guess, it would probably average out to like 3 or 4, maybe 5 nights I would have a drink. And it wasn't a problem. Like I was still performing well in the gym. I was still like, I maintained my body composition. I maintained my weight. I maintained all the metrics that I use to measure my fitness and health. But I just was like, I don't want to leave anything on the table. I don't want to have to, I have this thing that I say, if you're going to do something, do it right the first time. So like, I didn't want to have to repeat my 100-miler. And so I just wanted to make sure I went into it with like 100% effort and focus. And that 8 weeks was interesting for me because I realized when I told myself I was going to stop that it kind of sucked. I was like, this sucks. I would like to have a beer or a rum and Coke or whatever. And then that thought kind of scared me a little bit. Like I'm having a hard time not drinking. But, like my reason why was strong enough. I ended up not really drinking, so it was fine. But as I was running my 100-miler, it was at the end of the year, towards the end of the year. So I just started reflecting and thinking, okay, I want to do something I want to set a big goal for next year. What's it going to be? I'll just see if I can do the whole year without drinking alcohol. Because all the goals that I had set previously were usually like these physical fitness challenges, run X distance, do this weight on a lift or whatever. And I had never really pushed myself in other aspects. And so I committed to it. The interesting thing, and I think you'll find this interesting, is it was almost a nuisance on the people in my life. Like we couldn't do as much of the same stuff as we were doing before. I wouldn't enjoy drinks with my fiance, which she didn't really have a problem with it. She was super supportive, but like, I can't tell you how many times on my family vacation, my brother was like, dude, just give up. Like, let's have a beer. Probably 3 times a day for the entire week I was there. Right. And there's this big Christmas party that my gym hosts at the end of the year. And everybody was like kind of bummed out that I wasn't drinking. And it's so interesting because it's really not that big of a deal. Like I'm the same guy, and if I were to drink, I honestly probably wouldn't even drink enough for you to be able to tell. So like, what's the big deal? It's just super bizarre.
Yeah. I experienced that, like not as much anymore because like just from being in sobriety, my friend group and people I have around me has like drastically changed just because it's like not even like in like a super negative way, like you got, it's just like, it just happens, like you get sober young and it's just like, you don't really do the typical like 21-year-old thing on the weekends. So gradually and, hopefully your life and the people you have around you like changes. But yeah, dude, it's funny that you say that. Like honestly, I sometimes like I go out and like I'll have like a good time, which is the crazy thing. Like when I first got sober, like there was no way. Like I couldn't be social like in regard. I mean, I was full of fear and anxiety. I was putting like other things in my body too, like prior to getting sober, like hard drug wise. So like everything's messed up. Like in my head, I had a lot of like healing to do. But when I first got sober, like I was in fear, like 24/7, like couldn't like talk to anybody, was like you said, like awkward, like I was awkward. I was socially like disadvantaged, like I talk it else, like no way, like forget it. And really just like stuck in this just like self-pity, like self-obsession. And it was just awful. But over time and through like, a lot of different like ways to kind of like grow, I'm able to like go out now and like have a good time. And like honestly, it's kind of funny to be in a room. I mean, not all the time, but every once in a while, it's nice to be in a room to be the only sober person, and you can kind of just like enjoy the chaos of everybody else drinking. And it also like reminds you too. Like I go out sometimes and like I'm sober and it's like 11 at night or whatever. Like especially just like this week in particular, like being in a new environment and meeting people, it just reminds you that like you're not like really missing out on anything. Like I can still go. If I don't want to go, I won't go. I'll go study, do something else, or work out. Just like I just feel like every time I go and I see like what's actually going down, like if I'm not there, I can like have this idea in my head that, oh, they're having such a good time, like they're doing all this. But then you're like actually there's just like everybody's just like standing around, like chit chatting, like it's just like I don't know, it's just not that crazy, So yeah, that's just been my experience with it. But I'm still learning and kind of, I'm like 5 years sober, but a lot of my buddies are like 10, 15, 20, and like, they have a lot more experience than me. So I just try to stay like minded about the whole thing and kind of, learn as I continue to go along.
Let's walk through that process a little bit more if you're willing to share. I know you said you got into it at a super early age. Do you remember what age you were when you first, whether it was substances or alcohol or whatever, what age that was? What did it kind of look like when it started? How quickly did it progress? And then I'm excited after this. I would love to talk to you about like what steps you took to get sober, if you asked for help, et cetera. So maybe take us back there. Like what was it like at the beginning?
Yeah, it was like I said, it was really fun at the beginning. Alcohol, I loved it. Just like fixed a lot of my problems I had going on in my life. It runs in my family too, so like I'd always seen it and like seen the problems that it would cause like family members, and I made like I just never wanted to do it initially because like I saw how much destructive it could be. So I held off for a while my friends got into it. I kind of held off, and eventually, I was like, I had to be like 15 or 16 at the time, and then I started drinking, and just went along, got really popular. Was always like going out with friends, having a good time. Was smoking a lot of weed too, and then like I remember like I kind of like smoke a lot of weed, and then one day I got this terrible high from marijuana. I don't know what it was. And ever since I knew I would go back, I smoked more weed, and I would just like not be able to, I wouldn't have an enjoyable high. So that kind of opened up this door where I'm like, all right, I need something else to like drink with. And then I was introduced to cocaine. And right when I was introduced to cocaine and did that, I mean, that was like my thing. I did that and felt like Superman the first time I did it. And ever since then, I just always wanted to do it. And definitely started doing it too much. Definitely was in my head about it too. Like, I don't want to be the guy always doing coke. I got to be the guy always doing coke because I like it so much. When my friends would, I would always be the guy to initiate the buying of coke and hitting up, like having all the drug dealers' numbers on my phone and, you know, Venmoing the drug deal. Like I was just always like the middleman with it and always like pushing to get it. So I knew like something was going on, and then ran out of money toward the end. I was in college. I was like 19 years old, 20 years old, dropped out of college. I wasn't able to do anything literally. And I just remember like sitting in my dorm room one night when all my grades were terrible and I wasn't able to keep up with anything. And I just felt like shit about myself and wasn't working out, was drinking every day, doing drugs every day. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to like get out of this hole at the time. So I just said to myself, I was just like, you know what? Like, I'm just going to go all in on this drug thing and this alcohol thing, because in my mind right now, the only thing that works. And while that was a terrible idea and it just like tornadoed my life even worse than it was already, I really believe I needed to do that because I was like, that initiated my rock bottom. And then from there, you know, I like ran out of money. Now I'm doing like crack cocaine and like buying like harder drugs that are less expensive, but still kind of give me the same effect mentally. And in and out of rehabs, in and out of psychiatric wards, all through my hometown, sent down to Florida a couple times to go to rehab because there was like a big recovery scene down there. But it just wasn't really sticking. And eventually I got to a point where I was like, nowhere, I was homeless, like had nowhere to go. And my parents were like, you can either get on this plane and go back down to Florida into a treatment center, or we're going to drop you off at this homeless shelter. And it was a very hard decision for me at the time. But I got on the plane, went down there, and I really had no intention of getting sober or staying sober. I was planning on just coming back up to my hometown and doing what I always did. But the thing that was different that time around was at this place I was at, I met other young people. I'd never gone somewhere and like really met young people my age that were taking sobriety seriously. And it was very contagious. And these guys were excited about the thought of like who they could be if they stayed sober. The thought of like what life would be if they let this thing iterate over a couple years, a couple decades. And they were just excited about everything. They were excited about going to meetings. They were excited about getting a sponsor. They were excited about getting into the book and learning about the disease, learning about the cure, and all these things that kind of just wore off on me at the time. Because like I said, I went there with no intention of staying sober because I was committed to just doing that thing forever. Like I didn't want anything to do. But I met these people and they just had, it was so contagious, like their passion for it. And that kind of transformed everything for me. Instead of going back home, I decided to stay there. And then eventually I went out west to another program that was like a very like intense behavioral modification program. It was all young people. And it was a year long and it was like a structured living. So there were rules. You had to be out of bed at a certain time. You had to make your bed. You couldn't just leave your room a mess. Your roommates there was an accountability system. Your roommates held you accountable and you were expected to hold your roommates accountable. You had to go to recovery meetings. You had to work recovery steps, all while holding a job, paying your own rent, cleaning up after yourself, just basically like growing up, like becoming a man. It was basically like what this was. But I needed that. And it changed my life. I was introduced to these people that, you know, were just like me, were broken and using drugs. And now they were like go-getters, working 2 jobs, waking up at 4 a.m. And I saw that and I wanted that. And it started to look really attractive to me. And there were just a lot of like big mentors that I met out there in California that just really had such an impact on me. And they were kind of like how I am now, big on self-development, big on running, big on working out, big on, you know, narrowing your aim in life, big on just being like a good person, like all these things that I never really paid much mind to. And just to like, you know, keep it short, I stayed out there, sober a year. I don't want to go back to school, came back to school, and my life's just kind of been blossoming ever since. And I really do pay all tribute to sobriety and the people that have helped me along this journey. And it's still like the number one thing that on my priority list is my sobriety, because I know myself, I have plenty of experience of trying to get sober and failing and trying and failing. And I know to my core that if I don't prioritize and keep sobriety number one, everything else goes to the wayside. So it's my life's very simple when you think about it like that. You know, it's just keeping sobriety number one, and everything has seems to fall into place.
Damn, dude. That is crazy. That happened to you all when you were 19?
Yeah, I never had a legal drink, which is crazy.
That's funny. Damn, dude. That is an insane story, man.
Yeah. And it's crazy because it's like, dude, now it's like,
I was about to just ask you that question. If you could talk to yourself at rock bottom right now and you could say like, hey, we're in medical school, what do you think that guy would say to you?
I wouldn't have believed me. I was in, like I said, I was in the deepest, darkest pain cave I've ever been in. It's no 100-mile I've ever ran comes close to it. I was coming off of a lot of substances and alcohol. My brain was totally misfunctioning and malwired and just not acclimated or adjusted to how difficult real life can be. And I woke up every day and I hated myself and I was in fear and I couldn't talk to anybody. I didn't know how to vocalize my feelings. And there was so much work that needed to be done. It was honestly discouraging. It was like looking at a giant wall that I knew I had to climb over. And I never thought I was going to get over it. I literally was waking up every day and this is just how it's going to be for the rest of my life. My life's just going to suck. It's going to be shitty. I'm going to feel all these negative things. If I had come in and like tried to level with myself, I just don't even think I really would have been so consumed just and obsessed with myself at the time and all the negative things that I was feeling. I would have really been able to listen, nor would I have believed myself. But that's why I'm so heavy in sobriety, and maybe I'm a little biased, but it's just like that one thing like did so much for me. And you know, it's not everybody's problem, but for me, like that was my problem. So like eliminating like the drinking and the drugging, and not even like just that, because like the drinking is just a symptom of alcoholism. Like really the disease centers in your mind. So it's like learning how to deal with like the self-obsession and the addictive thinking, learning how to channel all that stuff. And, you know, because that played a big role into my fear. It was just like I was so feared up all the time because I was thinking about myself all the time. So, yeah, I don't know. It was like I wouldn't wish that on anybody, like that level of like just self-hatred and like the fear of the unknown in the beginning stages of recovery. But honest to God, I really think I had to go through that. I know a lot of people that I've had that experience with it too, where it's just like really just heavy stuff that you kind of just have to level with. But I really think it builds strong character, man. Like if you can see that through, I tweeted out today, I was like, you know, a lot of like great success comes from insecurity and loneliness. Like that's these things are typical emotions to sit through and feel, but they do have a lot of power if you can figure out a way around them, figure out a way to like flip them on their head and really use them to your advantage. But it's crazy. Like I just never thought like a big thing that I'm part of like 12-step program, and a big thing that they say in 12-step programs is, and I remember sitting in meetings at like 30 days sober, like in the back, like skinny and like peered up, and like they would always say like if you keep coming back, you'll have a life beyond your wildest dreams. And I just never thought that like I'd be sitting here like saying that cliche saying like over again. Like it's just, you know, it really is wild, because I've never been a good student either. Like that's the other thing. It's just like when you get sober and you self-discover, you like unlock and are able to customize yourself in ways that like you didn't think was possible. And it's really cool to, you know, I believe that God like kind of really like, I believe this is all part of God's plan for sure, but I also like have this deep feeling it's like living this life that I'm not really qualified for. And that is like really like freeing and inspiring feeling deep down. You know, you I know, like when you cross the finish line of a 100-mile race, it's just like you're crossing finish lines that you were never born to cross. Like, it's just a really cool feeling. And you know, I'm addicted to that feeling and I'm still chasing it. So
yeah, I think one of the reasons why I like doing this show so much is because I think having conversations like this, man, are like some of the most important things that we can do. You know, we live in, people call it like the microwave generation, right? Because of social media, we get these very bite-sized sort of microwave versions of advice and, you know, how to live a better life and how to deal with your finances and how to structure your day. And I think, you know, from an outside point of view, people could look at a lot of your content and judge it based off of what it is, because it is extreme, like to a certain extent, to a certain person. And like just point blank saying, get sober, it'll change your life. To a lot of people, obviously for whatever societal metric that is affecting it, it pushes them away. But like, if you sit down, man, and you talk to you and you hear your story, the amount of stuff that you've gone through, like I think there's probably very few people on planet Earth that could imagine that level of change that you've gone through. And I imagine in 5-10 years from now, the place that you're going to be is going to be even insanely better than what it is right now, you know, whatever that may look like. And so the reason why I bring this up, and I appreciate you being willing to share so openly about this stuff, is because I think that the long form conversations that we're having prove and show the value by way of creating empathy, because it's a lot easier now to understand your message. Like, I 100% think sobriety is super valuable, especially in a context like yours. I'm somebody who's never really had a problem. I can probably always include it at some level. I might need to back off a little bit at times. You know, I might not need to worry about it as much at times. But I would imagine at some point, at some level, your life, you will always be thinking about sobriety. Like, you'll always be, I would imagine, do you still go to the 12-step program? The 12-step?
yeah, the reason I went in the beginning, like I needed help. And now like a big reason I go today is like, I want to show people that look, this thing's possible. I try to go.
Yeah, I think that's it, man. Like, just give help to the people that are going through something that you've gone through. And I think that there's a very simple formula for feeling happy and feeling fulfilled with the work that you do by doing something similar. And like, dude, your story's crazy. It's crazy. Like, I can't imagine, you obviously hear stories like yours pretty regularly to a certain extent. But I think to take yourself from the place that you were to putting yourself, going to med school and pursue, you've done all these things. We haven't even talked about all the runs and stuff that you've done and the fitness things and dude, you're super fast. I saw you ran like a 16-minute 5K and you were pissed off about it. That's insane. Like, you know, you're a good sort of emblem for people, I think, to look to and know that there's hope for them and to change and be better and improve.
And like you said, like, I don't think there's a universal answer, you know, like even for me, it's like sobriety, but it's like not, it's all these other things too. I think that's a big misconception in the self-help and self-development world. People try to make this like an academic process when it's not an academic process. It's an experiential process. You can read all the books you want to read. You can watch all the podcasts. You can talk to mentors. You can pay for a coach. But at the end of the day, it's like, there's a quote that if the answer was more information, everybody would have a six-pack. Like, the answer is not more information. The answer is more experience, more putting yourself in these situations that force you to grow.
I also think it's I talked about this recently on the show. I can't remember with who, but it's a very Western idea to isolate a thing. So what I mean by that is like, all my problems are derived from X or Y or Z. And it's just not how things actually go. It's one of the reasons why, obviously, it's great that there's a lot of research out there on exercise and people have access to so much information, but it's one of the reasons why there's so much conflicting information. It's because in a lot of ways, a lot of these methods and systems work. Different methods and different systems work just the same. And there's these underlying principles that sort of connect them all. And I think if people just recognize that pretty much every variable, from the food they eat, the way they move their body, the thoughts they think, the things that happen to them, the way that they process that, the story they tell themselves about it, all of that, literally everything is connected in some capacity. I think it would be a lot easier for people to enact the kind of change that they would like to have in their life.
For sure. 100% agree with that.
Tell me about this DIY 100 miler, dude. I'm super excited to talk to you about this because I feel like you did something that a lot, like ultra running specifically, is super popular right now online. At least it feels that way. And maybe it's because I'm sort of in that world, but like nobody's going to go out and just run 100 miles for nothing. And you did that. So tell me about that.
So the big thing with that was I knew I was going to med school. Med school is very busy. So I knew I'm probably going to have to take a hiatus from this kind of running. And my big thing was I was slamming all these races basically just into my agenda before I left for school. So I did 100 miler last winter. I did an 8-hour. I did rim to rim to rim, which is in the Grand Canyon, and then I did a 50 miler that I do every summer with some of my buddies. And then I just have this desire to because the first 100 I did, I just remember coming out of it feeling very mentally strong and changed my life, changed the person I was. I knew I was starting med school, and I was just I need to run another 100 before I go to school for sure. So I initially went on Ultra Sign Up, was looking for these races. As you know, there's not a lot of 100-mile races that go on every Saturday, in your area. You kind of have to travel. They're expensive to get a bid. All these factors go into running these races. And all the races were 6 hours away, $300 for a bid. And someone proposed the idea to me. They were why don't you just run one on your own? So then I was that might be crazy enough to work. And the one buddy I know who got me into ultra running, I called him up because he's from my hometown. And I was best case scenario, I'm calling this guy on the phone. Best case scenario, he'll agree to run 50 miles with me. So I call him up, hey, I'm thinking about doing this 100 miler around our hometown. Are you interested in maybe running some of it with me? And he goes, I'll run all of it with you. And I've actually done this before by myself in our hometown. And I already have a map and a course and a plan. This guy's crazier than I am. And that was the best news ever to me. I was let's go, let's do it. And he was pick a date and we'll make it happen. So we were about 2 months out when I made that phone call, and I picked a date. And the date came around, and it was the front end of a heat wave. We just, we had a 7-mile loop, and then we had a shorter 4-mile loop because it was so hot out that we needed to get back to the water station. And 7 miles would have just dehydrated you way too quick. So yeah, front end of the heat wave, we're just running through town, running 100 miles. I was out there for 20 hours. It was great, man. Honestly, usually when you do those runs, you're in an Airbnb, you get shitty sleep the night before, you don't really know the course. But this one was awesome because I slept in my own bed the night before, didn't have to wake up especially early to start or anything. And knew the course, knew who I was running with. It wasn't really competitive. It was just, we were just running it. And it was great. I'm very glad that I did it. And just one of those kinds of experiences where you intentionally put yourself in really tough places. It's just changed so much of who I am. And every time that I go back, when you're at mile 75 or mile 80, and you can't fathom the idea that you still have a marathon to go or 5 hours to go. It's worse when you start thinking time, I can think to myself only 20 miles to go. But when I start thinking 5.5, 6 hours to go, which is what it's going to take me to run 20 miles in the back end of a 100 miler, I start freaking out. I'm just oh my gosh. But it really builds so much of these rare, necessary characteristics within yourself. And customize yourself. You can customize your attitude and your ideals and your mindset when you're late in a race like that. The first 50 miles of those events are easy. Nobody signs up for the first 50 miles. I ran the first 50 miles and I was telling myself when my watch clicked 50, I was like, now we start. This is why I wanted to do this back end, last 50 miles. And, you know, it's dark out. You're cutting into your sleep. I'm like running by myself down this like lonely dark trail with a headlamp. And it's so funny, man, because and you'll relate to this. It's like at the time you just want it to be over so bad. It's all you can think about is it being over. And then the next morning where you reflect on it the next day or the next week. And in a weird way, it's just wanted to go back to that place because that place you so much about yourself and the growth is exponential and just can't believe that you put yourself there again and, you know, you saw it through. And I think it was the perfect thing that I need. I only ran that race to get my mind ready for medical school. There was no physical benefit that I wanted from doing that. It was a pure medical mindset thing. That's the only reason I ran it.
Yeah, I think what's funny is so I haven't run any big distances since I think it was September of 2022. It might have been October. No, September. But it's been a long time, right? Like almost 2 years almost 2 years. And I thought about it a lot. One of the reasons why I don't really have the desire to sign up for the race is because of all of what you just described. It's like, it's such a big thing. And like, you have to plan so heavily and it affects in a lot of ways negatively a lot of the people that are in your lives. Like you can kind of kiss most of your weekends goodbye and then the last 3 months, which, I worked around it. I got up really early and I went on my runs if we were traveling or going somewhere and you make it work. Right. But one of the reasons why this kind of inspires me so much is because it makes you realize like, man, you don't really have to do that. You can just like put up a freaking temporary table in your garage, put some snacks on there and just like run loops over and over again until the distance is done. And I think that if in the future, I imagine I sort of like introduce myself to the ultra running and then step away for a while. I've just done this. I ran a 50 miler in 2019 and then ran a couple of 50Ks between, but I imagine I'll probably do something like this where it's like not a big thing. Don't even post about it. Like just do it because that's what it's for. To bring in your point about like the back half of the race, two points on that. Number one is, like I said, I ran a 50 miler first. When I did my 50 miler, I was wiped out, dude. Like it killed me. And I was a little bit I wasn't underprepared physically. Like I didn't have all the right stuff. I was wearing really bad shoes. Like I just didn't really know what I was doing. I just kind of jumped in. And it was cool when I did my 100 miler that when I got to the 50 mile mark, I was like, I feel pretty good still. Like it's insane to see how much progress that you can make with the distances that you've covered. Because like you said, after a certain point, you've gone so far, you need to, you almost have this 50 mile buy-in before you actually start to feel something. And then that's when like the real race starts. And what is so cool to me is I have less, I guess, fondness, it sounds like, than you about that time. Because like you said, when you're in it, you're just like, I want this to be over. But to me, I feel like that time is super helpful in discovering the stuff that's already there. And my story with that is I was about 65 miles in. It was the middle of the second day. It was super hot. Like it was starting to get really hot outside. I had sat down and I had realized I had been moving, so it wasn't bothering me. But as soon as I sat down, I realized that my left ankle was like twice the size as my right ankle. I don't even remember what happened, dude. It was just like super swollen. And I knew that when I stood up, it was going to take probably about a half a mile before I stopped feeling it again. I'm literally like taking shots of honey straight into my mouth and like chugging electrolyte drinks, trying to just get whatever food I could because I was super dehydrated by the time I got there because it was like an 8 to 10 mile stint from the previous aid station. And I didn't have enough water with me for the time. And my girlfriend at the time, now fiance, I'm like, I got to change my clothes. Like I've just sweat through all these, I've been chafing. This is not good. And so I stand up and sure enough, like I'm hobbling on this ankle and I'm out in the middle of the open woods and it's complete daylight and it's this pretty busy aid station. There's a lot of people. So I walk over and there's these people that have a Jeep set up and I'm like, hey, is it cool if I get naked and change my clothes behind your Jeep? And they're like, yeah, man, do whatever you want. And I was running it with a buddy of mine, and then we had two other friends there that were helping us aid. I've had both of them on the podcast before. But it was just me and my fiance. She was helping me change in my clothes. And I looked at her and I was like, hey, I just want you to know, like, this is the first time I'm voicing this out loud. Like, there's a very real reality where I do not finish this thing. And literally my mindset was like, I want to quit so bad, but I will not quit. And my mind was like, I hope that when we leave, I like fall over and hurt myself on the side of the mountain. So that way they pull me out, because I can't do this race anymore, but I'm not going to quit. And that's the only solution. And sure enough, you know, like it was crazy mountainous, crazy elevation gain. We were like hiking through the mountains for the next 4 or 5 hours, and just monotony. My mouth was open. I was in pain. I wanted to fall asleep. It was horrible. But then you get through it, and then you get to a point where you're like, I actually feel pretty good again. And then you keep going. And that's somewhere around like mile 90, 95, when you just kind of accept that you feel bad, but you're going to get it done. And so for me, I think it's cool because what you and I experience on the ultramarathon probably physically is pretty similar, but what it means to each one of us is different, because, you know, it makes me realize, you know, I'm not as tough as I think I am. I deal with struggle and challenge potentially better because, you know, I did the thing, but I deal with struggle and challenge similarly to a lot of people. And I think there's something very humanizing about that when you get to experience something that extreme and you get to learn that much about yourself in such a short period of time.
Percent. And before I forget, you know, your mindset when you run a 50 miler versus your mindset when you run a 100 miler is I feel like a big reason that when you're running a 100 miler and you get to the 50 mile mark, you've been telling yourself the whole race that you're running 100 miles, you're not running 50 miles. So just like that, perspectives, you know, is so powerful in the mind to where like you can get to 50 miles. Whenever I run 100, it's like my 50 mile time isn't that far off of like my actual 50 miler time. So it's all it is just a mental shift in perspective. Like, I'm here to run 100 miles. I'm not here to run 50 miles. So my mindset is totally different at 50 miles. Am I going slower? Am I taking my time more? Am I more aware of everything going on when I'm running 100 and get to mile 50? Like, yeah, for sure. But a big thing is that my mindset is totally different. Yeah, man, I totally agree with everything you said. Everybody processes the long races differently. I think in the end, it's just doing hard things, like putting yourself in the fire and just seeing what happens, and just that willingness to do that. And talking, like, relating back to one of the first questions that you asked me with like the do you grow just by maturing and getting older? I feel like a big thing with the ultras is such an emotional roller coaster, and you feel all these emotions like all at different times throughout the 20 hours that would normally take you like feeling good, being on top of the world, and then going back down to feeling shitty. It's just this like massive, like emotional roller coaster the whole time. And you could argue that you're feeling all these emotions and all these like different feelings at the same exact time. So you're feeling all of these different emotions at the same time. It would normally take you super long to feel just living your day-to-day life, because you're putting yourself in the fire. You're rapidly feeling all these things, and it's causing your growth to just catalyze, and you know, you're accelerating and growing super quick. That's how I like to think about it too.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that perspective before, and I would echo that. I think that's probably true. Like, you obviously don't, you know, if you expand out and look at 2 years of change, you know, from a regular, you haven't really, you're just living a regular average existence. The periods of time, but you know, you experience pain for maybe even weeks or months, but obviously when you run an ultramarathon, you're not spending that much time, but the amount of change that you go through and you get to experience is very similar. And I would like to think that that's probably true too. I've even heard people say that like running 100-mile race is almost the equivalent of a year plus a lifetime of what it means to be a person and go through this world. But I would just say whatever the timeline is, I feel like when you run an ultramarathon, you get to feel the highest highs and you get to feel the lowest lows. And I think that that is what the biggest takeaway is. Like, I have never felt worse physically or mentally in my life than when I ran 100 miles. And that's just it. And again, like, I've had worse things obviously happen to me and I chose to do that. So that was like a big thing going out there too. But, you know, your body, I think in my perspective, your body doesn't know that you're running 100 miles, or if, you know, you lost a loved one, right? Like, you're still experiencing those physical and physiological culminations of whatever that hard thing is the same way.
For sure. Yeah.
It's basically, we're traumatizing ourselves so that we could go.
Yeah. That's all it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so correlational to life. Like, everything, I feel like running is one of the sports. Other sports are for sure correlational too, but you take so much out of an ultramarathon and just apply it to business, apply it to being an entrepreneur, apply it to medical school, apply it to self-growth. Like, there's so much skills that you get from running that long distance, and you literally just take those skills that you got running 100 miles and just apply them elsewhere.
Yeah. Something that you said in there in your previous little monologue was do hard things. Like, obviously you and I are you're partial to sobriety, you're partial to running. I'm partial to running. I'm partial to, I think a lot of people would benefit from doing jujitsu. Like, it's just because we do those things. And I think that the method or the principle that underlines all of those is that you're stepping out of your comfort zone and you are setting out to achieve this big journey thing that you otherwise don't think you could. Like, before I ran 100 miles, I didn't think that I could run 100 miles. Like, when I ran my 50 miler, my first initial thought and introduction into ultra running was like, I want to run 100 miler. So when I ran my 50 miler, I was scared and I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it, but that wasn't really my ultimate goal. And I obviously still grew a lot from it. But one of the reasons why that the 100 miler was so impactful for me is because it was the thing that I did that I didn't know that I could. And it was really hard. And it took a long time to work towards. And so I think most people at some level probably have this like subconscious itch in the back of their head that is pointing them in some direction, whether it's ultra running or jujitsu or medical school or painting this big collection or something, right? Do that thing, the thing that you're scared of doing. That's the thing that's going to make you grow more than anything else. The process that you have to go through it's not about the achievement, right? That's the cliche. It's about the process, but the amount that you experience in that whole journey, inching closer to that thing that you'd like to accomplish, is really where all that growth and change takes place on a personal level. And I think we would be living in a much different world if people were more eager to take that stuff on.
For sure. Yeah. Unfortunately, you need to be self-willing to put yourself in those positions. And force people to do it.
That's something that I wanted to ask you earlier, because my personal experience with like pushing myself or making myself do the thing is pretty brutal, man. Like, I feel like I'm an inherently lazy guy and I lack discipline and I struggle a lot to be consistent with the things. And if you asked anybody in my life if that was the case, they would all say no. But I feel that way. And I think that there is a bit of it's a bit unbearable at times, which is why, you know, I think like your story obviously is an extreme case with sobriety, but like the 12-step program, it gives you a deeper purpose in a community. And I think that's why all that stuff is important, because quite frankly, the process of change is kind of agonizing at times, and you need outside help and outside support at some level to help you get through those things. What does that feel like for you? Like, day to day, are you just like pumped and ready to go, or do you feel like you still struggle with it at times?
Well, I think what you're saying is you're just hard on yourself. And I don't think that that's a bad way to be. I'm the same way as you. Like, I'm very hard on myself every day. And if you ask people how my life looks from the outside, they would probably, their answer would be a lot different than mine, and how I feel about it. But I'm the same as you, man. Like, I wake up some days I got it. Some days I'm ready to do it. Even if it's raining outside, I can go and run at like 6 a.m. And other days it's a struggle. Other days it's super hard. But I know the benefit of continuing to trudge And I know the benefit of going through the bad days and doing what I need to do, regardless of how I feel, just because I have that experience over time. And I can now see, and I believe internally, and I know this to be true because I've experienced it, that when you continue to do what you need to do, even when you don't feel like doing it, it just unlocks all these things in your life. And it makes life better compared to you not doing it and you conforming to your emotions or your feelings on the current day. And that was a big thing that made sobriety very hard for me in the beginning, is I didn't have that experience. I talked a lot about being in a lot of fear on, and I couldn't really see the benefit of all these obstacles that were in my life. Like, there's days now where I see obstacles and I get excited because I know it's on the other side of overcoming this. And I think that's like the hardest thing for some people to do is it's just playing the process of all this sobriety, self-development, whatever you want to call it. It's, you don't have that internal experience of overcoming hard things or putting yourself somewhere that's uncomfortable and really seeing like what happens when you do that on a consistent and constant basis. But yeah, I mean, I'm just grateful that I have the experience now, and I know when I wake up and I don't feel like doing it, I know the stakes are just even higher, because if I get up and do what I need to do regardless, one, a lot of times you end up snapping out of it. Like when you're halfway through, like there's plenty of times where it was so hard for me to put on my shoes, and then I put on my shoes and I'm out the door, and all of a sudden I'm in the best mood ever. So you just get to know these things. You get to know yourself as you continue to do it. But yeah, no, I mean, I struggled with stuff, man, all the time. Like a lot of the stuff I preach to on my Instagram, like I try to do that stuff, but am I perfect? No, not at all. So, it's really just for me is just like a willingness to really try to be the best version of myself every day.
Yeah, I think what you do when you start doing stuff is you just develop a logical brain. Like, I feel like I'm experiencing this now. Like, we're getting married in a couple months, and it's just like a stressful time, right? Like, a lot is happening. You're planning a wedding, you got to work. Like, I'm trying to do the podcast. I have like my own personal goals and everything, right? I'm trying to like make sure I'm taking care of myself, but you don't always know what that feels like or what it means or how it's supposed to look. And you're going through change and you just don't quite know how to place it. But like, despite all that, I've done all this stuff before, and I know that the only logical solution is to like, just check the boxes. Like, even if I'm mailing it in, I got to do that thing today. Like, it's on the list. All right, I'll do it. And to your point, a lot of days you start and you feel better, but a lot of days you don't, and you just do it anyways. And then like, hopefully tomorrow's better. And I think that on a large scale, that sometimes you just don't realize the difficulty of some moments that you have in your life until you're out of them. And, again, logically, once you've sort of developed that mind, when you're in it, and you're like, it doesn't change the experience. Like a lot of the days just suck, and it is what it is. But I know now logically that the only thing it's going to suck. It's going to suck. And I would rather get through this thing having done all these things than get through these things having not. And unfortunately, I think that that's the truth that it comes down to is I'm going to keep showing up. And obviously, ultimately, if things aren't changing slowly over time, something has to give, right? But for the most part, I think we're usually pretty keen on understanding when that is and when we're actually just in one of those moments where we sort of have to tough it out.
And, like life's hard too. Like life is very hard. And one of the other big things that gets me through difficult days is I feel like a lot of the things that I do, I've like been able to kind of channel down into like one output. So what I mean by that is I have these goals set for myself, and I have like life missions of like where I want to be in 20 years or 30 years from now. And when I get up in the morning to go run, and let's just say I don't feel like running, the purpose of me running that morning isn't just to sustain physical health, or isn't just to get outside and, get daylight or a meditative practice or whatever. Like, there's so much riding on all of my hobbies that flow into this like singular output of like where I want to be in 30 years. So when I like was able to kind of take all of my collective hobbies that are very different from the outside, right? Like running, medicine, lifting, I like to surf. I like to do like all these like different things that like are very different from the outside, but you know, the way that my life is like structured right now, they all serve a singular purpose of getting me to where I want to go in 30 years. So that's been like a big thing for me, because what that does is when you wake up and you don't want to do something, when I'm running, I'm not just running, like I'm preparing for, you know, a medical school exam. I'm preparing my mindset. I'm preparing myself for, you know, all these goals that I have down the road. Like I really believe like all my life is like connected like that. And that's just come from a lot of like self-reflection and a lot of like really sitting down and like asking myself, like, what do I want to do? So I feel like when you operate that way, and it's kind of like a hard topic to conceptualize. And I feel like I've kind of like taken it from other people a little bit, and I've kind of like slowly started to understand it myself. But when you make your life like very simple like that, and you have all these different outlets that ultimately flow into one output, it makes life very, very simple. And it makes things like more high stake, like running and like fitness. It's running almost isn't about running. It's really like the running I do has like nothing to do with running. It has more to do with like serving myself and being able to set myself up for like where I want to go down the road, if that makes sense.
100%. I think that's a hack, dude. Like I said, I've mentioned it 35 times on the show. I'm getting married later this year. I have done almost everything that I've done when something's hard has been in my mind for my future children. Like we're not going to have kids for like 6 years maybe, but in my mind, it's like, okay, we're getting married. Like this is going to be a thing. And it's becoming real to me to the point where like now if I get up and I'm like, I'm not feeling it today, that's usually my first thought. Like, well, there's going to be people that are counting on you to be a specific kind of way. Right. And so I think that the higher stakes you can make small actions, the better. This is perhaps a bit more philosophical and deep, but Carl Jung basically has this idea.
I love Carl Jung.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to interrupt you, but a lot of the Alcoholics Anonymous text was derived from a lot of his theories. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to kind of bring up that last point. I know like seeking a higher power is a big part of it, right? Like that was probably where he deferred the most from regular, you know, psychotherapy, psychology. And his whole thing was like, fake it till you make it. And I talked about this on the show before, but the reason why I bring that up is whether or not you believe in God. I think that there is a certain level of commitment to things when you realize that every action that you have is some kind of moral obligation. Like, dude, if I throw something at a trash can and I miss it, I go pick it up. And I like beat myself up over it. I'll like throw something and I'll miss and I'm like, I don't care. And I'll turn to walk and I'm like, no, you loser. Like you're a horrible person if you don't go pick that up. And then I'll go do it. Right. Or something the owner of the gym that I work at says a lot is don't walk past spilled milk. And I think that's a great way to sum it up. Like there's a moral obligation to fixing these small little problems. And you said this at the beginning of the show, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a pile of character, because that is ultimately what's going to serve us and other people the most right now in our lives and in the future in our lives. And after we're gone too, you know, like that is ultimately the basis to which we teach our children, to which they influence and impact other people. And I think in order to exist in some world, like you are as an individual are going to do almost nothing about it. But at the same time, every single thing that you do and the kind of person that you are and the kind of person that you become matters a lot, because it affects everything. And if everybody did it, like we would be in such a different place, such a different world, such a different society.
Such a good point, man. And this one like scenario comes into my head like when you talk about that. And I guess this is the good thing about like running like a motivational Instagram account, because you know I post all this stuff constant, like daily. And I'm always like taking in content from different sources. Every time I'm in a situation, like you were saying, like I throw something at a trash can and I miss, and I'm like, got to pick that up. Every time that I feel like not, because you know what the right thing to do is, right? Like people try to say that you don't, like you know, like if you're doing something wrong, like it lingers in your conscious. And there's this Jordan Peterson reel that I posted, and it's just like a podcast snippet, but he talks about, and I literally have the reel word for word in my head, and it just automatically plays every time I'm in a situation where I'm tempted to do something, to not do something that I know I need to do. And the reel is and he's referring to his therapeutic practice. So clinical psychology, clinical therapy. And he's saying, I've never seen anybody get away with anything. Never, not even once. You might temporarily make a rift, but it'll snap back closed on you. You might think you're getting away with something, but as time continues to go by, you're going to be in a situation where the rift that you temporarily created is going to snap shut on you. And it might be months, it might be 6 months, it might be a year down the line, but it will snap close. And it might even be so far down the line that when it does snap close on you and you get the bounce back of consequences that came with the initial action, you might not even be able to relate it to the initial action, which gives you the delusion that you got away with it, when in reality, you didn't. And it's just like, it's reality, you know? And he also says, he's like, who are we to oppose reality? Who are we? Like, we know what's right. We know what's wrong. When you're in a situation, when I'm in a situation, we all get the temptation to, you know, take the shortcut, to do the easy thing, to, you know, not help out, whatever it is. And it's so funny because every time I'm in a situation, that reel, it just automatically goes. It's like, I've never seen anybody in my clinical practice get away with anything, not even once. Every time. Like, I get hit with that. And I'm just like, I got to do it. And there's like a couple reels that I just are in my head because I'm so into that stuff, you know, like a lot of those like big guys have become such like big pieces of my life and mentors. And even though like they don't know I exist or whatever, but their work is so powerful and so relatable. I had a lot of like those like that just have gotten me through so much, you know, because it's just like, it just makes it very clear when you hear some of those like really influential people talking. I've had reels. I've been in the gym at like 12 a.m., like just same reel on repeat, like whole workout, you know? And it's just like, cause it's just like, sometimes it's just like what I need, man. And that's like really like what my life is. It's like, I'm trying to like develop this character and I'm trying to build into this person. And, yeah, it's just like really important for me to like, you know, have those mentors, have an established life, have people that, you know, I can call that have my best interest in mind, that if I need to be called out, they're not afraid to call me out, you know? So.
Yeah. I was given this advice on the show, and I have given this advice to a lot of people since. It's that everything in life they're a lot like pairs of shoes, you know, like there's going to be shoes that fit and there's going to be shoes that don't. And I think whether it's workout style, diet style, mantras, sort of like what you're saying. I too have lots of those that I revisit quite often. I'm super into like samurai and Eastern philosophy. A lot of those repeat in my head. I think find the shoes that fit is good advice in all aspects. And, you know, we're here to do whatever you think you're here for. You know, that's going to differ person to person. But I think that one thing's for certain is that we're all different and that we all have different things that we need. We all have different things that work. And I think it would do people a lot of good to figure those things out.
For sure.
Dude, I appreciate you so much, man. This was an awesome conversation. Before we close off, two things. Number one, if there's anything else you want to add, you know, feel free to add it in there. But two, where can people find more from you and the content that you're putting out? You have awesome social media pages.
Yeah. So really, I only have like the Instagram, which is at David.Millar, MILLAR.mindset. It's kind of an intense page, so take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, I post daily motivational reels. I have a newsletter too. The link's there. You can subscribe to that. And it's basically just all the content, all the stuff that I think's cool, all the stuff I think's moving, and all the stuff that I think serves and plays a role into the person that I want to become. I just stuff it all on that page on that newsletter. The newsletter goes out every week. So you can find all that there. But dude, thank you so much for having me. I wish I could have got to know you a little bit more. I have a lot of questions I want to ask you too. But yeah, man, you seem like a super cool guy, and I'm glad that somehow we were able to connect and talk. So
yeah, man, absolutely. Let's stay in touch. I will. I'm definitely excited to hopefully see how things go with med school. Obviously best of luck with that. But yeah, we'll stay in touch. Well, best of luck with med school. Again, thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate you sharing your story. I think a lot of people will get something out of it. I know I did. Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode of Good People. Make sure you head on down to the show notes below, anywhere that you're listening or watching, and check out David's Instagram and all the content that he puts out. If you're on YouTube, before you head out, remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our weekly uploads. And if while you were listening, you enjoyed, remember to share this episode with someone you love, perhaps your grandma. We'll see you next time.